Hi, fifth grade readers. It is Miss Groyle coming to you from my dining room today on Thursday for our reading lesson. So before I start our lesson, I just want to make sure that you have already listened to both chapters 5 and chapter 6 in our story, The Thief of Always. So if you have already done that, then you're in the right place and you can keep going. But if you have not listened to both of these chapters, I would like for you to pause this video, listen to them, and when you're done, you can join us back here for our lesson today. Our lesson today is something that is so exciting, and I can't wait to share it with you. But before we get started, I just want to make sure you have the right materials. So all you'll need today is your pink packet and then something to write with, very similar to yesterday. So I'll give you just a few seconds to find those things, and then I will jump right into our lesson for the day. All right, readers, so yesterday Miss Frank started going over settings in fantasy novels, and she did a fantastic job going through that with you. I just want you to think back to yesterday and try to pull from your memory and your brain one of the most popular settings that you can think of that we discussed yesterday that take place in a fantasy. Okay, readers, so 3, 2, 1, what is it? Try to whisper it to a parent, yell it across your house, whisper it to a stuffed animal, tell a family member or friend. A popular setting that you remember from yesterday. Thanks for sharing that with whoever you decided to. I'm sure they loved hearing from you, especially Mr. Teddy Bear. As we move forward today, I just want to give you a little bit of a layout as to what we are going to be doing. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information before I have us pause and watch another video, and then we'll come back together and discuss, and we'll get more information, and then you'll be able to practice this on your own in your Google Doc. So very similar to what we did yesterday, just a different face teaching you and some different content. So today our lesson is all about learning alongside the character in a fantasy novel. So as you are reading fantasy novels or higher level texts that are sometimes harder to understand, we see that the author sometimes gives us clues and helps us learn information alongside the character. So to give you an example, I want you to think about Harry Potter, if you know the story. And Harry, he starts off not really knowing much information, but as the story progresses and we keep reading, Harry's learning more information and we're learning it at the same time that he is. So Harry's a great example to kind of think about when we think about learning alongside the character. Another character you can think of is Lucy from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think about Lucy often, maybe because she's my dog, I can hear her. Hopefully she doesn't come and interrupt this video. Lucy in our story doesn't know much about Narnia. She doesn't know much about the wardrobe itself until she's experiencing them for the first time. And as Lucy is experiencing these things, we are learning right alongside with her this new information. Okay, so as we continue this lesson, we're going to look for examples of when we're learning with characters, when the author is giving us clues, when just the character themselves are learning something new. We're going to go through that together today. So what I would like for you to do is you are going to pause this video after I give you your instructions, and you're going to practice looking for information as the character is finding out the information as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn your pink packet to page 6. Yep, page 6. And you'll notice there's a line up at the top. This is session 2, and we're starting in this top section. I already filled out mine, because the teacher also has to go through their own lessons, right, friends? Absolutely. So at the top it says, list everything you learned from Mr. Tutmus. So you are going to be watching a video clip from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And the scene, it might be a little scary at the end, but for the most part I think it'll be fine. It's a really great scene to use for this. but you're going to list everything that you're learning in this scene. So what I would like you to do is find page 6, grab your pencil or your pen, and just jot down some ideas as you're watching of things that you are learning from Mr. Tutmus in this scene. Okay, learners, so you're back on this video, which means that you've already watched both parts of our Thief of Always, and you've listened to my little spiel right before this, and you just returned from our video about Mr. Tutmus. So if you have done all of those things already, you can keep going with this video. So something that I wrote down on my sheet, I want to see if we have some of the same ideas. One thing that I wrote down is that when Mr. Tutmus is talking, we're learning a lot about Narnia, and we're also learning about where Lucy is. So we're seeing that Mr. Tutmus and Lucy, they have this shared experience, and I don't know if you caught it, but I really paid attention to it. Lucy says that her dad went off to war, and Mr. Tutmus, oh no, did you hear my dog bark? She heard her name. And so Mr. Tutmus also shares that his father went off for war a long time ago as well. So that's something that we learned with Lucy. We're also learning a little bit about Narnia as we're watching the fire. We're also seeing the lullaby that he's talking about, and it's just a really cool, I think, first experience with this idea of learning right alongside the character. Okay, so 2 books that I haven't shared with you yet that I brought, just printed their covers for you, is The Wizard of Oz. And now Dorothy is our main character in The Wizard of Oz. And as the story is going on, we are learning right alongside with her as the author is giving us new details and new experiences that Dorothy is going through. We're learning about Oz, we're learning about Dorothy, we're learning about all of these things right alongside our characters. And the last story that I pulled and brought is A Wrinkle in Time. You might be reading this for your book club book, so you should be pretty familiar with it. But Meg in our story is learning all of these new things right as we are. So in all of the stories that I printed and brought today, in all 4 of these stories, the characters are starting by not knowing a lot of information about what's going to happen and where they are and the setting that they're in, but through experiences and through different interactions and conversations, they're learning new information, and we are too, as readers, which is so cool to be able to see. So what we're going to do that I think will really help you kind of put this idea and thought in your memory a little bit more is we're going to use our story, The Thief of Always, and I'm going to refer back to chapter 3. So if you don't really remember chapter 3, you're welcome to go and rewatch that chapter if you would like, but otherwise I'm going to be pulling direct quotes from our story, so it's a-okay if you just want to listen and pay close attention to the lines that I'm pulling up. Okay, so I'm going to read from chapter 3. The house was more wonderful inside than out. Even on the short journey to the kitchen, Harvey glimpsed enough to know that this was a place built for games, chases, and adventures. It was a maze in which no 2 doors were alike. It was a treasure house where some notorious pirate had hidden his blood-stained booty. It was a resting place for carpets flown by jinns and boxes sealed before the flood, where the eggs of beasts that the earth had lost were wrapped and waiting for the sun's heat to catch them. It's perfect, Harvey muttered to himself. Mrs. Griffin caught his words. Nothing's perfect, she replied. Why not? Because time passes, she went on, staring down at the flowers she'd cut, and the beetle and the worm find their way into everything sooner or later. Hearing this, Harvey wondered what grief it was Mrs. Griffin had known or seen to make her so mournful. I'm going to pause there. As I'm reading this part in the story, I'm paying close attention to the conversation that Harvey and Mrs. Griffin are having. So Harvey mutters to himself, "It's perfect." And then Mrs. Griffin replies, "Nothing's perfect." So then, as she's foreseeing, Harvey is starting to wonder, and I'm wondering at the same time, why she might have said that. And then Mrs. Griffin continues and she says that because time passes and the beetle and the worm find their way into everything sooner or later. So that right there is telling me to just stop and pay attention to that. Something feels really off from that little section, and it seems like she's warning me of something. So I'm going to pay close attention to that as I continue. It was a conversation that Harvey and Mrs. Griffin were having, but I'm able to pay attention to it and see how it's going to impact the rest of my story. So I realized by rereading this section that she's warning him, she's telling him to look out for something, and now, the rest of the story, I can use that as I continue reading. So Harvey's learning something and I'm learning something right along with him. As we continue, oh my goodness gracious, we have talked about so much today, and there was a lot of information thrown at you. So I just want you to pause and reflect and see if this is making sense to you. Does the idea of learning alongside the character and learning new information make sense to you? It's a really cool piece of fantasy, and I think that it's something that we as readers need to pay more attention to. So I'm glad that this lesson is walking us through this today. So remember, as you're reading, the author will sometimes have you and the main character learning at the exact same time. They can do this in the form of a conversation between two characters. We just saw an example of that in The Thief of Always. Our two characters were Mrs. Griffin and Harvey, and they were having a conversation, but we were able to learn from that conversation as well as Harvey. It can also be just a statement that another character says or that is just said in the story. So statements can be places where we're able to learn. And then the last one that I want to make sure you're aware of is that sometimes new experiences are how we are learning new things. So at the beginning of when I started reading in chapter 3, we're getting an explanation of what Harvey is seeing along the walls and inside the house. So that's a new experience for Harvey. He's never been inside the house before. He hasn't seen the walls and all of the cool things that are in there. So that's a new experience that Harvey is having, and we're able to learn right with him what's going on and what he's seeing and kind of what he's taking in. So what I want you to pay attention to as we wrap up this video is you're going to get a chance to practice this on your own in your own book club book. We're all reading different stories, and some of you might not have the same book as somebody else, and that is a-okay because they're all fantasy stories. So all of your books should have some great examples of this somewhere inside of them. It's just up to you to find it. So what I want you to do after this video ends is you are going to become a book detective. And you are going to look for these learnings and experiences and conversations, and you're going to share a few examples with your teacher on your Google Doc. So your job is to, 1, find your book club book, pull it out, make sure that you have at least 2 chapters read to do this with. Your second step is you are going to find a part where you see a statement or a conversation or a question and an answer, and you're going to describe what you're learning and who is learning. So that kind of jumps into number 3. You're going to explain who is learning this information. Is it just you learning the information? Is it the character just learning the information? Or are you both learning it together? I think that's the one that we see a lot of, is that we're both learning together. But it is possible for just the character to be learning something. Maybe we already know the information, it was already told to us. And maybe it's just you learning the information. The character might already know it. But whichever instance it is, it would be obvious to you as the reader. So pay close attention to all of the details that the author is giving you. Look for those different areas in your book, and you're going to write them down. I'm going to repeat that one more time because it was a lot. So question 1, you are going to say, does the character ask a question and or get a helpful response? Something to think about. Something else to think about is there a statement that gives the reader or the main character important information? Did you see that anywhere in your book club story? And question 3, kind of a guiding question, is who is learning this information? Is it just you, just the character, or are you both learning it together hand in hand? So I hope that this is making sense to you. If it doesn't, please reach out to your teacher. But what your job is now is to find that book club book and look for places where you are learning alongside characters inside of your story. Remember, we're always learning information in our books, and a lot of the information is important, but you really have to be a detective and look for those places where we're learning together, or just the characters learning, or just your learning. I can't wait to hear some of your responses and to have a conversation with you. I miss you all. I hope you are having a fantastic Thursday whenever you are doing this reading lesson. We're almost to spring break, and you are all doing such a fantastic job with this virtual learning, so keep up the great work, 5th graders. I can't wait to check in with you soon. Enjoy those book club books, and keep being rock stars. See ya.